I still remember the exact sound the floorboards made in my dad's house. A sharp, distinct creak right outside the master bedroom. For 32 years, that sound meant my dad was awake, getting ready for the early shift at the manufacturing plant. But on a rainy Tuesday in October, 3 months after we buried him, that creak didn't belong to my dad. It belonged to my younger brother, Jason. I didn't think much of it at the time. We were supposed to be clearing out the house, packing up decades of memories into cardboard boxes. But looking back, that was the exact moment the betrayal started. If you've ever lost a parent, you know that the grief doesn't just hit you at the funeral. It hits you when you're standing in their closet, smelling their old coats, realizing they are never coming back. And the last thing you expect in that moment of profound vulnerability is for your own blood to stab you in the back. I'm making this video because I know there are families out there tearing themselves apart over estates, money, and inheritances. People think it won't happen to them. I thought it wouldn't happen to me. But my brother didn't just steal from me. He stole the one thing my father valued most in this world. And he would have gotten away with it too, if he hadn't made one incredibly careless, stupid mistake. A mistake that led a total stranger to pick up the phone and call my personal cell number on a Thursday morning. To understand why this hurt so much, you have to understand who my dad was. His name was Robert. He wasn't a wealthy man. He didn't have a stock portfolio. He didn't drive a luxury car. And he never took us on fancy vacations to Europe or Hawaii. He worked as a floor manager at a sheet metal fabrication plant in the Chicago suburbs for 41 years. His hands were basically made of sandpaper. He had permanent grease stains under his fingernails that no amount of scrubbing could ever fully wash out. He was the kind of guy who fixed his own truck, patched his own roof, and wore the same pair of Red Wing boots until the soles completely disintegrated. But my dad had exactly one nice thing. One luxury item that he bought for himself in his entire life. It was a 1978 Rolex Submariner. He didn't buy it new. He bought it used in 1985, right after he got his first major promotion at the plant. He paid for it in cash, saving up 20s and 50s in a coffee can in the garage for nearly 3 years. It was a stainless steel dive watch with a black dial and a faded bezel that had turned a slight grayish blue over the years. For my dad, that watch wasn't a fashion statement. It wasn't about showing off. He wore it under the cuff of his flannel shirts, where nobody could even see it. For him, it was a physical reminder that his hard work meant something. It was proof that a blue-collar guy who barely graduated high school could earn a piece of permanence. He wore that watch to my Little League games. He wore it when he taught me how to drive. He wore it at my high school graduation. And he was wearing it the day he walked down the aisle at my wedding. It was a part of him. When I pictured my dad, I pictured that watch on his left wrist. When he got sick, pancreatic cancer, the kind that doesn't give you much of a fighting chance, the weight dropped off him so fast that the watch bracelet became too loose. It would slide all the way up to his forearm. About 2 weeks before he passed, he called me into his hospice room. Just me, not my brother Jason. The setup, and Jason is 3 years younger than me. And to put it bluntly, we have never been on the same wavelength. If I was the kid who did my homework on Friday night so I could relax on the weekend, Jason was the kid who forged our dad's signature on a failing report card on Monday morning. Jason has spent his entire adult life looking for a shortcut. While I went to state college, got an accounting degree, and settled into a boring but stable corporate job, Jason was always one step away from becoming a millionaire. At least, that's what he told everyone. In his 20s, it was multi-level marketing. Then it was a drop-shipping business that left him with a garage full of cheap plastic phone cases. Then it was crypto. Then it was day trading. Every single time, the inevitable crash would happen. and Jason would come crawling back to Dad for a temporary loan to make rent or keep his car from being repossessed. Dad, being the soft-hearted guy he was underneath that gruff exterior, always bailed him out. "He's your brother, David," Dad would say to me, coughing heavily in his recliner. "When I'm gone, you're the only family he's got. You have to look out for him." I hated it. I hated watching Jason drain our dad's modest savings, but I bit my tongue. So, back to the hospice room. 2 weeks before the end, Dad pulled me close to the bed. His voice was nothing more than a raspy whisper at that point. He reached over to the bedside table, picked up the Rolex, and pressed it into my palm. It felt heavy, cold, and incredibly significant. "Put it in the safe at the house," Dad told me, struggling to catch his breath. "The combination is my anniversary. You know that. Keep it safe, Davy. When this is all over, I want you to have it. You earned it. You know the value of $1. Jason would just pawn it." I tried to tell him he wasn't going anywhere, that he'd wear it again, but we both knew I was lying. I drove back to his house that night, opened the heavy green sentry safe hidden in the back of his master bedroom closet, and placed the watch inside its original green leather box, alongside his life insurance documents and the deed to the house. I spun the dial, locking it. I thought it was secure. I had no idea that Jason had been standing in the hallway, watching me through the crack in the door. 6:15, the house clearing. Fast forward 3 months. The funeral was a blur. The legal process of initiating probate was a nightmare. Since Dad didn't have much, there wasn't a massive estate to divide, but we still had to clear out the house so we could list it for sale. We agreed to split the proceeds of the house sale 50-50. It was what Dad wanted in his will. I took a week off work to pack up the house. Jason reluctantly agreed to help. For the first 3 days, it was agonizing work. Sorting through 40 years of a man's life is exhausting. Every drawer you open feels like a punch to the gut. I was boxing up his old flannel shirts, crying over a drawer full of useless hardware receipts from 1998, just emotionally drained. Jason, meanwhile, was useless. He spent most of the time sitting on a folding chair in the garage, scrolling through his phone, occasionally carrying a garbage bag to the curb to make it look like he was participating. But on Tuesday afternoon, his behavior suddenly changed. I was in the kitchen scrubbing down the refrigerator when Jason came walking down the hallway. He looked jittery. His eyes were darting around, and he kept rubbing the back of his neck, a nervous tic he's had since we were kids. "Hey," he said, his voice a little too loud, a little too forced. "I'm gonna take off for a bit. Need to run some errands, pick up some more packing tape." "I bought a 6-pack of tape yesterday," I said, pointing to the counter. "It's right there." "Yeah, well, I need to grab some food anyway. I'll be back in a few hours." Before I could say another word, he was out the door. The front door slammed, and I watched through the kitchen window as he practically ran to his Honda Civic, backed out of the driveway entirely too fast, and sped down the street. I stood there with a wet sponge in my hand, a sinking feeling forming in my stomach. Something wasn't right. I've known Jason for 29 years. I know what he looks like when he's hiding something. 8:30, rising suspicion. I tried to shake it off. I went back to cleaning the kitchen, but my brain wouldn't let it go. Why was he so nervous? What was he doing in the back hallway? My feet started moving before I even made a conscious decision to go check. I walked down the carpeted hallway, the same floorboards creaking under my weight. I turned into Dad's master bedroom. The closet door was ajar. I dropped to my knees and pushed aside the empty shoeboxes. The sentry safe was sitting there in the dark. I reached out and pulled the handle. It didn't open. It was locked. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "You're being paranoid, David," I thought to myself. He's just being lazy and wanted an excuse to leave. But as I started to stand up, I noticed something. A tiny detail that most people wouldn't catch, but I did. The dial on the safe was resting exactly on the number 0. My dad was meticulous. When he locked that safe, he always gave the dial 3 violent, full rotations to scramble the tumblers completely. It never landed cleanly on the 0. It was always on some random number like 47 or 12. My hand started to shake. I knelt back down. I turned the dial, right to his anniversary month. Left to the day, right to the year. Click. I pulled the heavy metal handle. The door swung open. I reached my hand inside, blindly feeling for the familiar texture of the green leather Rolex box. My fingers brushed against the life insurance folder. They touched the manila envelope holding the house deed. But the green box was gone. I pulled the paperwork out just to be sure. I shined my phone flashlight into the back corners of the steel box. Nothing. My dad's watch was gone. Panic is a weird thing. It doesn't always make you scream or yell. Sometimes, it just makes you completely cold. I sat on the floor of my dead father's closet for 20 minutes, just staring at the empty space in the safe. I immediately called Jason. It went straight to voicemail. I called him again. Voicemail. When he finally came back to the house 3 hours later, he didn't have any packing tape. He didn't have any food either. What he did have was a smug, relaxed look on his face. The nervous energy from earlier was completely gone. I confronted him the second he walked through the door. "Where is it?" I asked, standing in the hallway, blocking his path. "Where is what?" he said, trying to act casual, but I saw the slight flinch in his shoulders. "Dad's watch, Jason. It's not in the safe." Jason scoffed, rolling his eyes in that dismissive way he always did when he was caught in a lie. "I don't know what you're talking about, man. What watch?" "The Submariner. The one Dad wanted me to have. The one that was in the safe that you just happened to know the combination to." "Are you serious right now?" Jason fired back, his voice raising defensively. This was his classic playbook. Get loud, get aggressive, play the victim. "Dad's been sick for months. He was out of his mind on pain meds at the end. He probably sold it to pay for his treatments, or he lost it, or one of the nurses at the hospice took it. Why are you immediately accusing me?" "Because the safe dial was left on 0, Jason. Dad never left it on 0. "Oh, so now you're Sherlock Holmes?" he mocked. "I didn't touch the damn safe, David. You're just stressed. Don't put this on me." He shoved past me and went into his old childhood bedroom, slamming the door. I stood there in the hallway, my blood boiling. I knew he was lying. I felt it in my bones. But I had no proof. I had no evidence. If he took it, he had probably already pawned it at some sketchy cash-for-gold place in the city, and it was gone forever. Melted down or sold for a fraction of its worth. I didn't sleep that night. I laid in my childhood bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling like I had failed my father. He trusted me to keep his legacy safe, and I let it get stolen right from under my nose. I spent all of Wednesday calling every local pawn shop within a 30-mile radius. I gave them the description: 1978 Rolex Submariner. I asked if anyone had brought one in. Every single shop gave me the same answer: no. I was out of options. I figured the watch was gone. But what Jason didn't realize, what his desperate, greedy little mind failed to comprehend, was that a vintage Rolex isn't just a piece of metal. It has a serial number. It has a history. And more importantly, he didn't check the false bottom of the green leather box. It was Thursday morning. I was sitting at the kitchen island, drinking a lukewarm cup of black coffee, trying to figure out how I was going to look Jason in the eye for the rest of the week. My cell phone started vibrating on the granite countertop. I didn't recognize the number. It was an area code from a town about 45 minutes north of us, up near the wealthy northern suburbs. Normally, I don't answer unknown numbers, assuming it's spam. But given the circumstances, I hit accept and put it to my ear. "Hello?" I said. "Hi, is this David Harris?" A man's voice asked. It was a calm, older voice, very professional. "Speaking. Who is this?" "David, my name is Arthur Pendleton. I own a shop called Pendleton Vintage Timepieces up in Highland Park. I specialize in estate jewelry and vintage watch restoration." My heart stopped. The coffee in my stomach turned to lead. "Okay," I managed to say, my voice suddenly very tight. "I apologize for the out-of-the-blue phone call," Arthur continued, his tone careful and measured. "But I'm looking at a 1978 Rolex Submariner, reference 1680. It's sitting on the counter in front of me. The young man who brought it in claims it belonged to his deceased father and that he's liquidating the estate." I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter so hard my knuckles turned white. "Is the guy's name Jason?" Arthur paused. "Yes, he showed me his driver's license." "How did you get my number, Arthur?" "Well," Arthur sighed softly through the phone. "This young man, Jason, he brought the watch in the original box. I don't think he inspected it very closely. Under the velvet insert, there was a service receipt from a certified Rolex technician, dated 4 years ago. The client name on the receipt was David Harris, and your cell phone number was listed as the primary contact." I closed my eyes. The memory hit me instantly. 4 years ago, Dad's hands were getting too arthritic to unscrew the crown to set the time. So I took it to a specialist to get the movement serviced and the seals checked. I had put the receipt under the pad in the box so Dad wouldn't lose it. Jason, in his infinite stupidity, just grabbed the whole box and ran. "Arthur," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of rage and overwhelming relief. "That watch belongs to my father's estate. I am the executor. My brother stole it from our family safe 2 days ago." There was a heavy silence on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint, ambient ticking of clocks in the background of his shop. "I suspected as much," Arthur finally said, his voice dropping an octave, sounding much more serious. "I've been doing this for 30 years, David. You get a sixth sense for these things. Your brother came in here sweating bullets. He didn't know anything about the watch. He didn't know what caliber the movement was. He didn't know the service history. He just slapped it on the counter and asked for $5,000 cash. $5,000. A vintage 78 Submariner in that condition, with the original box, was worth at least $12,000 to $15,000 on the open market. Jason was trying to dump it for a fraction of its value, just to get quick, untraceable cash. "Where is he right now?" I asked, already walking toward the front door, grabbing my car keys off the hook. "He's not here," Arthur said. When he asked for $5,000, I told him I needed to authenticate the movement. I took the watch into my back office. I found the receipt, and honestly, his whole demeanor made me incredibly uncomfortable. I came back out and told him I couldn't do the deal today, that I needed to run the serial number through a database. He got highly agitated. He said he would just take it to a pawn shop. "Did he leave with it?" I yelled, panic rising in my throat. No, calm down," Arthur reassured me quickly. "I couldn't let him walk out of here with it. If he took it to a pawn shop, it would disappear into the system, and you'd likely never see it again. So, I did something slightly unorthodox." "What did you do?" I told him I'd buy it. I gave him the $5,000 in cash from my safe. He signed a basic bill of sale, took the money, and practically ran out the door. The watch is here with me, David. It's safe. I let out a breath that was half sob, half sigh. Arthur, I don't know how to thank you. I will drive up there right now. I will wire you the $5,000. I'll pay you extra for your time. Please, just hold on to it. There's no need for extra payments, son, Arthur said kindly. I'm a father too. If one of my boys pulled a stunt like this, well, I'd want someone to look out for the family. Drive safe. I'll be here. 1940. The drive and the transaction. The 45-minute drive to Highland Park felt like it took 6 hours. The sky was overcast, a bleak, gray Midwestern afternoon that perfectly matched my mood. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my wrists ached. My brain was running through 100 different scenarios. Why did Jason need $5,000 so desperately? It wasn't just pocket money. He wasn't just looking to buy a new TV. You don't steal from your dead father's safe unless you are in deep, immediate trouble. I pulled up to Pendleton Vintage Timepieces. It was a small, unassuming brick storefront with heavy iron bars on the windows and a buzzer on the door. I rang it, and the lock clicked open. Inside, the shop smelled like brass polish and old wood. Glass display cases lined the walls, filled with beautiful, intricate mechanical watches. Standing behind the main counter was Arthur. He was a distinguished-looking man in his late 60s, wearing a tailored vest and a jeweler's loop resting on his forehead. He looked up, saw my face, and immediately knew who I was. "David?" he asked. "Yeah," I nodded, walking up to the counter. Arthur didn't say another word. He reached under the counter and pulled out the green leather box. He opened it and turned it toward me. There it was, Dad's watch. The slightly faded bezel, the scratches on the stainless steel clasp from where Dad used to rest his wrist on his metal workbench. Just seeing it sitting there under the bright halogen lights of the jewelry store brought tears to my eyes. It felt like I was looking at a piece of my dad. "It's a beautiful piece," Arthur said quietly. "Keeps magnificent time. Your father took good care of it." "He did," I whispered, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. It was his pride and joy. I pulled out my phone and immediately transferred $5,000 into Arthur's business account via wire. I showed him the confirmation screen. "I can't thank you enough, Arthur," I said, picking up the box and holding it tightly against my chest. "You saved my family's legacy today." Arthur offered a sad, knowing smile. "Watches just tell time, David. It's the people who wear them that give them value. Take it home. Put it somewhere safe. And," he hesitated for a moment, "be careful with your brother. A man who sells his own father's memory for quick cash is a man who has nothing left to lose." I nodded. I knew he was right. I walked back out to my car, locked the doors, and placed the watch in the glove compartment. I sat there in the silence of the parking lot for a long time. The sadness was completely gone now. It had been replaced by a cold, calculating, absolute fury. I started the engine and drove back to my dad's house. It was time to face Jason. When I pulled into the driveway, Jason's Civic was parked carelessly on the grass. I walked up to the front door, unlocked it, and stepped inside. The house was quiet. I walked toward the kitchen. Jason was sitting at the kitchen table. He had ordered a large pepperoni pizza and was eating a slice while watching a YouTube video on his phone. He looked completely relaxed. He looked like a guy who had just solved all his problems. The heavy, nervous weight that he carried for the last 3 days was entirely gone. He glanced up when I walked into the kitchen. "Hey," he said casually, speaking over the noise of the video on his phone. I ordered pizza. Grab a slice. I didn't say anything. I walked slowly over to the opposite side of the kitchen island. I didn't take my jacket off. I just stood there, staring at him. He took a bite of pizza, chewing slowly, but his eyes darted up to meet mine. He could feel the shift in the room. The air was thick, suffocating. I'll never forget the look on Jason's face when I placed Dad's green Rolex box on the kitchen island. The color drained from his face instantly. His eyes locked onto the watch, and for a moment, he looked like a man who had just seen a ghost. I held up the vintage Rolex and spoke quietly. Funny thing about old watches, Jason. When they're serviced, they come with receipts. I told him I had tracked the watch to a dealer named Arthur Pendleton. Jason had sold Dad's heirloom for $5,000. His hands started shaking. Finally, he broke down and admitted everything. A year earlier, he had borrowed $30,000 from a predatory private lender for a failed business venture. The debt grew out of control, and after being threatened by collectors, he panicked. Instead of asking for help, he stole Dad's watch from the safe and sold it for quick cash. "I was desperate," he cried. "Dad would have understood." That was the moment I lost all sympathy. "Dad is dead, Jason," I said. "And he isn't here to rescue you anymore." I ordered him to leave the house immediately. As executor of the estate, I made sure his inheritance was handled through our lawyer. He eventually received his share, minus the money I spent recovering the stolen watch. We haven't spoken since. Some people say family deserves forgiveness. Maybe. But there are lines that should never be crossed. My father spent his life working hard to provide for us. That Rolex wasn't valuable because of its price. It was valuable because it represented his sacrifice, integrity, and love. Today, the 1978 Submariner sits on my wrist. Every tick reminds me of the kind of man my father was. And every tick reminds me of a lesson I'll never forget. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones most willing to betray your trust. Protect your family's legacy, because once it's gone, you may never get it back.